What happens when one of the world's most recognizable celebrities takes on the fight for justice, while her family is forced to flee their homes from a raging wildfire? It sounds like a paradox, almost too dramatic to be real. Yet this is exactly what unfolded in California. At a time when the flames of reform and literal firestorms collided, Kim Kardashian was stepping into the halls of power, challenging a broken system, while her sisters, Kourtney and Kardashian, were packing hurried bags, escaping walls of smoke, and watching their neighborhoods burn. This is the story of how two battles, one inside America's prisons and another on the edge of its burning hills, intertwined in the lives of the Kardashians. The scene begins with Kim Kardashian sitting under the blinding lights of a Capitol office, her voice steady, deliberate, and charged with the weight of lives behind bars. She was no longer just a reality star, no longer the woman associated with designer handbags and television drama. In that moment, Kim Kardashian was an activist, a reformer fighting for prison reform, determined to shift national attention onto the injustices of mass incarceration. The room was filled with lawmakers, advisors, and advocates, yet all eyes were on her as she spoke of clemency, second chances, and stories of people who had been forgotten by the system. But at that very same moment, hundreds of miles away, California's wildfires were surging, fierce and merciless. Evacuation alerts were hitting phones, emergency sirens blaring through once quiet suburbs. In hidden hills and Calabasas, the world of the Kardashian sisters was thrown into chaos. Kourtney Kardashian was rushing to collect belongings for her children, torn between the fear of losing her home and the responsibility of staying calm for them. Kardashian, shaken and determined, was on the phone with security and neighbors, checking if roads were clear while ash rained from the sky. The Kardashians, who had built empires of luxury and comfort, suddenly faced the raw, unforgiving reality of nature's destruction. For Kim, the fight for prison reform was personal. She had already pushed for the release of Alice Marie Johnson, a grandmother who had been sentenced to life in prison for a nonviolent offense. That victory had lit a fire in Kim's mission, giving her the credibility to speak not just as a celebrity, but as a woman using her platform to fight for justice. Every word she delivered in that office, every meeting she attended, was aimed at drawing attention to a cause larger than herself. Yet even as she fought for the freedom of others, her phone was vibrating with updates. Her sisters were evacuating, flames were dangerously close, and homes of neighbors were already lost. The contradiction was striking. On one side, Kim Kardashian was immersed in America's political system, pushing against the steel bars of injustice. On the other, her family was packing photo albums, children's toys, and treasured heirlooms into cars, driving through smoke-filled streets, uncertain if their homes would survive the night. This was not the scripted drama of reality television. It was raw, unscripted life, where personal stakes and national battles collided in real time. Kourtney Kardashian described the chaos of that day as surreal. The sky turned from golden California light to an eerie orange glow. Helicopters circled above, dumping water, while flames crept closer with every gust of wind. She could feel the heat on her skin even miles away, her children's eyes wide with fear. Meanwhile, Kardashian shared her own fear, leaving behind a house she had carefully built into a sanctuary, unsure if she would ever step inside it again. The evacuation was not glamorous, not controlled but frantic, emotional, and terrifying. Kim Kardashian, fighting for prison reform, was torn. Her heart was split between two worlds, her mission to advocate for those imprisoned unfairly and her family, forced to run from fire. She was criticized by some for stepping into a political arena, questioned about her qualifications, dismissed by skeptics who saw only her reality TV past. But as she continued her fight, the juxtaposition became clear. The Kardashians were living in two states of emergency, one within the criminal justice system, the other in California's scorched hills. What drove Kim was not just fame. It was a growing understanding that she had the influence to open doors that were shut for others. She had access to rooms where few could speak, and she carried with her stories of mothers, fathers, and children who had been locked away for decades. She saw herself as a bridge between two worlds, the glamorous and the forgotten. Yet as she stood in her polished suit, speaking of reform, she could imagine her sisters coughing through smoke, gripping the wheels of their cars, headlights cutting through ash as they searched for safe ground. The wildfires did not discriminate. Million-dollar mansions stood in equal danger as modest homes. Celebrities who had lived in luxury for years found themselves sleeping in evacuation centers or temporary hotels, stripped of the comfort that had defined their lives. For Kourtney and Kardashian, the evacuation was a reminder of fragility, of how quickly control can slip away. Their fame, their wealth, their influence, none of it could shield them from fire. Meanwhile, Kim Kardashian's fight for prison reform gained traction. She sat with lawmakers, lobbied for bipartisan support, and worked with legal experts to draft real changes. Her critics remained, but so did her persistence. She knew that prison reform was not about headlines. It was about lives, about restoring dignity to those who had been cast aside. Every time she mentioned clemency, every time she uttered the phrase "second chance," she carried the weight of stories that deserved to be heard. The fires eventually calmed, but the scars they left remained visible in blackened hillsides and in the memories of those who fled. For the Kardashian sisters, the evacuations became part of their family story, a chapter where survival was tested and priorities reshaped. For Kim, the flames were both literal and metaphorical. The fire of reform burned inside her, even as wildfires consumed the landscape around her family. In the end, the story of Kim Kardashian fighting for prison reform while her sisters faced wildfire evacuations was not about contradiction, but about convergence. It showed that even in the glare of fame, real battles, justice, survival, protection, define who we are. Kim's fight was a reminder that voices can change laws. Kourtney and Kardashian's evacuation was a reminder that nature spares no one. Together, these stories painted a portrait of resilience, of privilege intersecting with vulnerability, and of a family learning that even as the world watches their every move, they are not immune to its trials. This was not just another headline. It was a moment where activism and survival collided, where Kim Kardashian's mission for prison reform stood against the backdrop of wildfire evacuations. It was proof that behind the gloss of fame are lives shaped by fire, whether burning through unjust prison sentences or raging through California hills.